Hi, I'm Anna Pettygen, Executive Vice President with GovExec, and I'm here today with Kurt Steege, Chief Technology Officer at ThunderCat Technology, to talk all things AI. Kurt, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here, Anna.
Let's dive right in. How can AI be used to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of public services, and what are some of the examples that you have of successful implementations?
It's really interesting. So, I think I may sound like a broken record as I go through this whole thing, but one of the things that was interesting, this week already, I was out in San Francisco at NVIDIA's AI conference called GTC.
Great.
And I would recommend it to everybody to go take a look at what was out there, and if next year you get a chance to be part of it. But what I found was very interesting is that, like, there's so much going on right now. Like, everywhere you talk, you hear about it. But one of the overriding themes that was going on there was the idea of AI as a partner, as a co-pilot, as not necessarily something that you just use, something that you interact with consistently. And I thought that was a really interesting way to put it, and a really interesting way that folks kind of got into it, right? The idea that you can do that and kind of move open and get into the ideas that are possible. Another idea that came up during one of the committees that I'm on was the idea of, like, approaching it as like a child, like you as having two kids we just talked about,
Sure.
under three, getting into it, like exploring it, understanding those things. And what I found in a couple of different areas, one area that I was really excited about was I had a conversation with some folks from a company called Prion, where they're taking the idea of a digital human, implementing it for the city of Amarillo. And what they found was, in order to get people to understand what services are out there, hey, how do I sign up for water? How do I sign up for utilities and things like that? In order to accommodate the folks that are there and work with the folks there, they had to deal with it in terms of creating this assistant with 62 different languages and dialects, because there's so many different people in the area. Coming from, I was speaking earlier, coming from where I come from, a town called Jackson Heights in Queens has been known as, like, having the largest diverse population out there of, like, 150, 160 different dialects of. So having that idea and having that interaction, I think, is really good and helps for that efficiency. And instead of having to look it up and type it in and all these other things, being able to have a conversation just like we're having right here, and going through that I think is a really interesting way to look at things.
That's great. What role can AI play in addressing some of society's biggest challenges today, like climate change, healthcare, education?
Yeah, again, like another thing, it's another announcement that just came out on Wednesday from the conference or whatever. We'll talk on the climate side first. NVIDIA announced their what's called Earth 2. It's a digital twin of the Earth. It's a physics-based model of the entirety of the Earth. And what it's allowing folks to do is understand the interactions of the atmosphere, weather patterns, all of these different things on very large scales and even very small scales as well. The current modeling or whatever is kind of has a wide range of where it can be, and it's within multiple kilometers of where a weather pattern can be. What they're trying to do is shrink that down to even sub-kilometer, right? By doing the ability to get through all these things, right? All these different parameters. One of the really interesting things that they're trying to do with it, and where they're testing it out first, is around the island of Taiwan. Taiwan, maybe folks don't know it as much, but just in the last century, right? So just this century, so since 2000, they've had 100, 130 different typhoons hit that country. And what they want to do is get really good predictions. If you look at some, I'm sure you've looked around here, like when we have hurricanes coming into the U.S., you can see different models, the European model, the American model, and they kind of diverge. And if you really get into the weeds, there's like 50 different tracks, and understanding what those are is extremely important to get the human life preservation, property. And then if you want to think on a global scale, so many of the semiconductor work that's being done there, so interruptions to the global supply chain and stuff like that. So understanding where this goes is really important. So once we can get to there, we have these ideas of, almost like as I said, sub-kilometer forecasts, so that you can know where flooding is going to be. We at ThunderCat are actually having some conversations with some other cities, coastal cities, that are trying to do the same thing here in the U.S. and say, hey, I want to make sure that my people are protected. I want to make sure that, if I have the idea of a hurricane coming in on a coastal city, right? They have floodgates that they can open early.
Right.
They can drain a lake a little bit earlier, right? The initial part of that is really around the idea of, tasks that can be done and automated. But then you get to the point where you start to pull in weather forecasts. And hey, I can do this a day before it actually happens if I know it's really going to be there. If I think it's going to be there and it goes the other way, that might be a problem. So the better we can get with these forecasts, the better off we can be in that space. From a healthcare perspective, there's just a ton of areas where that works right now. So there's the idea of DeepMind AI. They did a bunch of work with the National Health Institutes of the UK. They created an algorithm where they can see eye diseases.
Wow.
Like 50 different ones just by looking in the eyes. Another group that interesting. It's a small startup of a couple of my daughter's friends in college. She's graduating this year, where they want to take the idea of speech recognition and map that over so that as they have interactions for elder care, they can have interactions. Caregivers can have interactions with the individuals there, maybe understand some of those things. So if your speech pattern changes a little bit, right, that could be a sign of early onset dementia, Alzheimer's, things like that. So those are all areas there. And if we get to on the education side, one of the really interesting things that I was talking to someone about this past week as well, is the idea of specialized, more individualistic classes and learning. Not everybody learns the same way, right? There are folks who are visual learners. There are folks who are sort of need to actually work through it from reading it and using AI to change those different modalities is really interesting. Like the Amarillo thing that we talked about before, that 60 dialects basically came from one school where they speak 60 dialects at home, right? So like understanding the ideas that are available there, like there's certainly some educational large language models and natural language processing, where you can deal with that. And then you have, you take into consideration also the folks that may be challenged in certain ways, right? They may have to learn a different way. Maybe they're nonverbal, and this is a way for them to participate in a class or something like that. So there's all of these different ways to make sure that this takes us to the next level.
Yeah, those are some really powerful use cases and examples. So what skills and knowledge do you feel public sector employees need to have in order to effectively work with AI, and how do you recommend getting trained and upskilled in this area?
Sure. Well, I think it's kind of interesting. There's a couple of things there, and there's some skills and there's some other things. But the biggest thing I would say is for folks to be open to change. There's this oft misquoted, misattributed quote to Charles Darwin that says, it's not the smartest or the most intelligent that survive. It's the most that's adaptable to change, right?
Right.
He never said it, but it's a really good, measure and, quote to kind of think as you go through this thing, is you have all this stuff that's going on, and the people that are going to be able to do the right work are the people that are really open to that change. And, we talked about the wild-eyed youth and kids and looking at things. I think that's really important, especially as you go through this, like not to fall prey to the old mantra of if it's not broke, don't fix it. This is the way we've always done it. You know, there's no reason not to take a look at these things, right? And like, I think probably, you know, it's going to sound, I don't know, trite or whatever, but one of the most important things for AI, in my opinion, is to really understand your subject, right? Where you work, what your mission is. And if you talk about the federal government, right? Take that and see where you can improve something there. It can be small. It doesn't have to be this huge grand thing, right? It can be small. It can be just, you know, working through some tasks and things like that. And what I think is, you know, there are plenty of classes out there, you know, depending on where you go through. I mean, I went through a data analytics class that was, you know, online from MIT. You can look at your local schools if you want to go to something in person, but like every school out there has some online capacity to do this work. Most of the big corporations that deal with AI also have this as well. There's NVIDIA, where it was, you know, they have tons of deep learning institute and free classes and paid classes. Dell has free classes and paid classes, you know, intro to AI, just to get yourself started and look at those things. So every other areas would be, you know, hey, you know, if you, hey, you know, they're becoming less important. You know, most of the time I would be like, oh, learn how to code, learn Python, right? But yeah, just yesterday I was looking at something, preparing for this and trying to help those individuals at my daughter's school at TC&J, and like, if you pull this thing together, like it was a specific LLM called Mistral, and you type in what you want, just like you would see OpenAI, ChatGPT, or Llama, or any of the other ones, right? You type it in, and as you type it in, it gives you the answer. On the right-hand side, it gives me the entire code, Python code right there. All you have to do is copy and paste it in at that point and say, hey, okay, here's where I'm going to put things. You know, and that's true. And an individual I was talking about this past week was working through something where he wanted to have an email sent, right? He's like, I've never coded Visual Basic. You know, I don't know how to do that. So basically went into large language model and say, hey, how do I code Visual Basic for this? And within 10 minutes, he was able to do it. So like, the feedback and the information, so try some things, see if it works.
Yeah, lots of opportunities and just getting your hands dirty a little bit. So we've talked a little bit about this already, but collaboration between public and private sectors is often crucial for successful implementation of AI initiatives and projects. Can you talk a little bit more about some examples of successful partnerships where AI has been used to address public sector challenges?
Sure. We did mention earlier the Amarillo one, where we're talking about, you know, many different languages, many different services, and how folks can get take advantage of those services and understand those things. You know, that's one, because it was Dell, it was Prion, it was the city of Amarillo working together to make this thing happen. Really interesting video with the CIO of the city of Amarillo, describing how they went through it and how they found things. Talked about National Health Services and DeepMind AI and how they work to understand, you know, 50 different eye diseases, right? They also have same group has another one where they're looking at the ability to understand kidney injuries. Back to the smart city side, there's a company called Sidewalk Labs, which is part of Google, Alphabet, and all that other thing. They're partnered with the city of Toronto to create smart neighborhoods. And the biggest one that's out there that most folks may hear about, and it's a long-standing public-private partnership, and there's so many of them, is with NASA, right? The Artemis program that's going to the moon. There's, you know, you name it. There's you know, probably 10, 12, 20 different private-public partnerships right there in order to make that happen. Right.
That's great. And then finally, in what ways can AI be leveraged to enhance decision-making processes within governmental agencies or public institutions? And how do you ensure transparency, lack of bias, and accountability in those AI-driven mechanisms and decisions?
That's a great question. It's like, it's part of the risk thing right there. You know, I think one of the things we said earlier is important there, to understand the mission, understand where you're going with it, and be very clear and open with how you do that work. Understanding the security and data privacy aspects of this is going to be important. How you do that work, right? How you pull things back in together. I mean, you think about the ideas around making things more efficient, right? We talked about that a few times, right? Think about a cyber expert, right? As they're going through these things, understanding as a partnership, cyber individual and AI, taking those things together, the cyber individual the AI piece of it can remove all the easy stuff, right? All the 85% of things that are out there. It's like, okay, I have tools to do that. I have tasks. I have automation to do that work, right? And then you take, the cyber expert. She could be out hunting on the internet to find, or on your internal networks to find what's out there. She could have a tool, right, that says, okay, now I can take a look at all these things, pull these things in together, and look for the stuff that's wrong. And AI is going to point out the stuff. Hey, this looks a little weird, right? That person could then go and say, all right, yeah, let's look at that a little bit deeper. So the human in the loop is still going to be a part of all this, and that's why I love the partnership part. A lot of this stuff was also called out in the recent executive order. And like trustworthy AI. But I think the biggest risk right in here, and we talk about all these other things, the biggest risk is the problem of bias in these things. And I don't know if it could be stated enough on where these kind of things can happen. Making sure that you have the correct data in there, making sure that you are representing different communities the right way, and just in a simple, so like if I was the city of Amarillo doing their work, right, and I just went to the city of New York and took all of their information and tried to program it for this, it wouldn't work very well, would it? Right? It wouldn't work very well. If I was, we talked to NASA Artemis, right? We figure out how to land on the moon. We do all that work, right? The next step is to go to Mars. It's like, well, we figured out the moon. We'll just be able to land on Mars but it's going to be different information. It's going to have different contextual information associated with it. And I think that is, when you start to deal with communities where people are marginalized and people are in different areas and have different perspectives, making sure that is in your models is going to be critical for it to work, because otherwise you're going to have people left out, right? You're going to have, you don't want to go too far the other way either. You want to make sure everybody's being represented appropriately in that space. And I think that's going to be one of the hardest parts of this, is making sure that we have the right information to train these models on.
That's great. Kurt, thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time.